Today we're going to do a very basic animation, and that animation will trigger a custom event in a script that we write. My starting point is this from the learn.unity.com VR development pathway, the Create with VR 2021, and the awesome graphics here from Kenny.nl, the conveyor kit, kind of give a factory look. So let's say when you pick up this box, we do a custom animation. Let's say for whatever reason, there's a book flying in a circle. We'll go grab the book. Lovely. So here's our book. And this thing is just going to do a little animation and go in a circle. And it's going to spawn some other objects like, I don't know, apples. So to do the animation, if we go here, we bring up our animation window, which is under Window, Animation. These are kind of confusing sometimes. The animation, that's the actual keyframes where you're moving the book around every so many frames. The animator is basically a bird's eye view of all the individual animations. So you can move from one pattern to the next if you're moving something around different positions. So in the animation, with the book selected, I'll just hit Create. It'll say, where do you want to put it? Well, let's go to the assets. I made a Suitor Animations folder ahead of time. We'll call this the book circle. It's actually not a circle, but we'll call it a book loop. And we'll say at this point in time, and I want to make sure I have this, copy world position. At this point in time, we're going to start the recording here and add the property of position. So the start and the end will be right there. So let's say at the 20 frame mark, we want it to be about right. Yay. And at the 40, I'm going to delete this one for now. At the 40, we want it to be about here. And then at the 60, we want it to be over this way, and then we'll copy this frame, and I'll control scroll out here and say hit a 1 second, 20 frames. We'll paste that. So we kind of have this little strange loop. It's not too bad. Doesn't look horrible. And then as that is going, and that has now been saved, by the way, inside of my Suitor Animation. So I have the animation itself and then the animator. So when it starts, it'll go straight to the book loop animation. If you don't want it to start right at the beginning, I'm going to do a create state empty and make that the default state. So the only way this will ever play is if I call it through code, which is kind of what I want to do. So if we go back to our scene, and we're going to write a script that's going to be on this book because you want the script to be on the thing with the animator. So we will create a C# script. We'll call this spawn apples. So we'll drop that right there. So now our book has that. Let's collapse some of this stuff. I've got way too much stuff going on. So there's our animator that we did when we created this on it. And it's going to run that loop. And then we have our script here. So let's open this up and let it instantiate some things. So here's our new script. We're going to make a couple of references. One's going to be public game object apple. One's going to be, let's just make it a spawn point. And then we'll grab the transform.position of that. And we're going to make a custom function that we can run at a certain time in that animation. So let's say public void spawn apples. We're not passing any variables. And we will just say instantiate. And then what are we instantiating? The apple. And where is going to be the spawn point dot transform dot position, and at the same rotation, so quaternion dot identity, which grabs the rotation. Oh, it doesn't like that the script name is the same as this. Spawn and apple. There we go, because it's going to do one at a time. Okay, so it's looking for an apple and a spawn point. We need to make both of those. So in the course library, prefabs, objects, fruit, there's some apples. We're just going to build the apple, basically. We need a sphere collider. We also want a rigid body on there so it will fall when it spawns. And we'll just call this apple red. We'll make that a prefab by dropping it into my prefabs folder. Original prefab. Okay, so we've got the apple. We don't need it in the scene. But this book needs to know this prefab, so we connect those. The spawn point, let's just create an empty right here. We'll call this spawn point, and we'll put it right below the book there. Yeah, something like that. That looks good. So on the book, we have the spawn point. Very good. So now we have a function called spawn and apple, and we can run it at any time during this. So let's say right there we want it to spawn the apple. Well, that's what this little button here is, the add event, and it says, what function do you want? Well, spawn an apple. It found it. Awesome. And this currently, if I look in my animations, let's collapse that, go to my animations. Currently this is going to loop, and so every time it goes around it's going to spawn an apple right there. So, but we first need to call the function of the book loop so that it starts the animation. So there's a couple of things happening. The animation itself is going to call a function of spawning apple, but when we pick up the box, it's going to start this book in its process. So by piecing these things together, you could do, various machinery animations that trigger other things, etc. So this box is a grab interactable. Let's collapse some of this. So on this box, we're going to have a script that will, when we pick up the box, it's going to start the book loop. So on the game boss, we're going to have a script. So let's make that script real quick. Call it game manager, which, fun fact, it changes to a gear if you call it game manager. So we'll open up the game manager script, and in here we're going to make a new function, public void play book loop, that. And then we can name the animator. So we need a reference to an animator. So we'll say public animator book looper. Sure. So now down here we can say, when we run this function, book looper dot play, and then we have to play the exact name of the animation. So if we look in here, it is book loop with a capital B, capital L. So in quotes, book loop. There we go. So when should this function run? That function will run when we pick it up. So inside our grab interactable, we can say when we hover it, when we select it. Let's say when we first select it. We'll add an event there and say, okay, the game boss, which was just an empty object before, has a script. No, it doesn't have a script on it yet. I haven't put it on there yet. Game manager on this game boss. Okay. All right, box. Now, game boss has a function or a script called game manager play book loop when we select it. So let's test it. When we pick it up, it should loop the book. Whoops, one mistake that I made. The game boss needs to know where the book looper is. So if I just drop the book on here, it'll grab the animator off of it. It'll grab this off of it. So now the game boss knows what to actually do when we pick it up. There's my book, there's the box. Pick it up, it starts the loop. And it is spawning apples. However, they don't seem to have gravity. Let's fix that. In my prefabs, the apple didn't have the rigid body on it, just the one in the scene did. I forgot to if you're building one out here and you make a change to it, you need to go to the apply all that would be underneath there. But now I have it. So the prefab does have a sphere collider and a rigid body that is using gravity. Let's try it again. Okay, here's the book. Here's the book. Here's the box. Pick it up. Sure enough, it is dropping an apple every time it hits that part of the animation, which is exactly what we wanted. One other change I want to make to my apple prefab is this collision detection. I want to do continuous dynamic. They kept falling through the floor when I tested earlier, so let's try that. So let's play in maximized and test this out. There's the box, there's the book. Pick it up, starts the animation. The animation triggers the spawning, which works great. So you could piece these things together to make more complex animations and triggering of other functions, and it's great. So I hope this helps somebody. Enjoy.